Welcome back to our module on creating Agile governance. So having laid out some of the principles in the first session, we're now going to look at a particular approach to Agile governance that I've been working with in the past and that has been adopted by quite a number of companies in the last few years. It's based on something called holacracy, which came out of an Agile software company originally, developing it to see how to make sure that as much of the diversity in the company, the different perspectives were included in decision making, and yet that the company was able to move forward, taking decisions really based in the present moment on what was needed rather than trying to execute big long-term plans. So I'd say that this is rather than a full, complete, accurate description of all the details of holacracy. It's rather my take on how I've experienced applying these concepts in the organization that I've founded and led and that I've seen worked with in other areas. In the resource library, you'll be able to find more of the formal documents, and on their website, more of the concrete practices and things, and the latest working sheets and guidelines and everything that they work with. But this will give you a sense of how I've used it in the kind of contexts that we've been talking about. So here's a reminder of the principles that we touched on in the last session. And so I believe that an approach such as this one will help us to create the structures so that this kind of culture that reflect these principles can thrive. Because that's the real challenge. If you think about the integral model again and the 4 quadrants, it's how do we enable structure in the lower right to support the kind of culture that we want to create in the lower left so that we get that alignment. That's one of the greatest challenges, and that I think is what this kind of approach can help us with. So the key theme here is dynamic steering. And I referred to that in a previous session as the way you might ride a bicycle, where you've got your long-term goal in mind, but you're really focused on the present moment and making sure you don't bump into anything right in front of you. That's not the way we're used to running organizations. We're used to trying to work out what the future's going to look like, predict where we're going to be, and then make a plan and control our way forward and drive that plan through the organization. Well, that in these kind of change contexts simply doesn't work because things are moving so quickly that the moment you take a step, your plan is out of date because things have changed. So how do you work out how to run an organization when you can't plan your way forward, but you really have to navigate step by step as we move? It's something that we're not normally trained to do in our business schools, which is why the IBM survey identified these challenges, and we're saying it's so hard for us to find the kind of qualities that we need in particularly this kind of operating reality. So in dynamic steering, the key is to experiment and adapt. So we stay present the whole time with what's going on now, get the data from the present moment, and then that data informs how we move forward. So as we're riding our bike, we see something coming our way, that gives us information, and then we know what to do next to be able to avoid that obstacle and keep moving in the right general direction. So in a way, like we were talking about at individual level, the importance of being really present with the current moment. This is an organizational practice that helps the organization stay present with the current moment and not worry too much about the future and not get stuck in the past, but keep moving forward step by step. And as we take a step, we then stop and sense and see what implications that step has and then take the next step. So it releases a lot of pressure. When we were looking for the right kind of organizational form in the Center for Human Emergence in the Netherlands, which I founded, we kind of found ourselves going round and round in circles. We tried all these business planning approaches, all the kind of traditional tools, and none of them seemed to work. And when we found this approach, it really liberated us because it meant that we didn't have to work out, exactly what our strategy was going to be going forward, make a big plan, implement all of these concepts. We simply had to stay present with what was true now for us as an organization, get the information from that moment, and then take the next step, and then we'll see. So that's the liberation that it brings with it as a practice. And not only is it liberating for us as people, but it's actually far more effective in these very dynamic change contexts. So when we're thinking about decisions in dynamic steering, decision making is often a challenging process because everybody has their different perspectives and the ideas. And we're trying to get to a point where we feel we've really got the best decision. So, we have conversations about, well, if we take this decision now, then what might be the implications 6 months down the line? And, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And you're working with a lot of unknown variables if you're speculating about the future. In this approach, what's most important is a workable decision. And what a workable decision is one that works for now. So what you're asking people as you look to take a decision is, will this decision work for now? Or does anybody see a major problem to us doing this now in terms of the impact it will have now based on everything we know? And if it's workable for now, then we take the decision because we can always revisit it the next day or the next week. So what's workable for now? Take it, move forward, see what happens when we take that decision, gather the data, and that informs our next step. So any issue can be revisited at any time. You don't have to worry about taking a decision and it being stuck in stone for the next 2 or 3 years. You take a decision, that informs an action, that generates feedback and information that enables you to take the next step. So all that's important are tensions that are present now. Not speculation about the future, but given where we're at now with the organization, what are the things that are creating tensions in the system, and how can we start to move forward, find solutions that are workable now for those tensions? Should that not be working for us, then we can always fall back to predict and control, but only when that's really necessary and if we can't find a way to dynamically steer. So it doesn't completely exclude it, but the optimal governance system really allows us to dynamically steer our way forward. One of the other key principles in this approach is the principle of individual action, which I touched on briefly. What it means is that as an individual in the organization, often what happens is because the structure is so hierarchical, people are afraid to use their own initiative. And if they can't find a rule to define what they should do in a certain situation, they'll ask their boss or the one higher up the hierarchy what they should do, and they'll have to wait for an answer. Maybe they'll need to check with somebody higher up. And it takes a long time to go up the chain of command before the information comes back down again, and makes you highly inefficient as an agile organization. So the principle of individual action says that even if what you feel in the moment is the right thing to do, and that doesn't seem to fit with existing policies, that's still what you need to do. And that should that create stress or tension in the system, you need to be prepared to restore the balance. And what that means is maybe by doing what you do, you tread on one of your colleagues' toes, you somehow move into their domain. So you need to go to them and explain the situation and ask them if there's anything you can do to restore the balance. Or it may be that it creates a tension because you felt that was really the right thing to do in that moment and it proved to be so, but it runs counter to the policies that we've agreed with each other in the organization. So what you do then is you take that as a tension. That's a classic example of a tension. I felt I needed to do that in the moment, it worked, and yet it's counter to the policies that we have. So you take that into one of the governance meetings and explore that with each other. So how does that moment inform how we need to evolve our policies to make them more adequate and appropriate?